So while we're all finding out what Beware the Ides of March means out there, and all of that wonderful stuff, power rankings. The potentially last one of the season. Now, for people out there who are like, man, I want things to be back the way they were. I'm going to do this once because for original subscribers, for old fashioned, I used to pop open a can of soda at the start of my videos. At least at the start of the first can. And for people who are wondering, yeah, I've got enough to get me through a while. Yeah, we're good. If it comes down to being in this house for 2 weeks, we're good. So not a lot changed from last week to this week because, of course, the last games were played on Wednesday, and then all of this chaos takes over. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday, there's nothing to make these things change. Sorry, touched my face. You know what I noticed last night was every time somebody talked about don't touch your face, they would do it. It's one of those things like don't yawn, and then people yawn, right? All right. This week, number 31. And what I did with this week's power rankings, I took the Stanley Cup magnet off because we don't know what's going on with that. The NHL plan, I think, is to make sure that the players are completely insulated and then go. So number 31 this week, and they stay in the same spot. Now, they did move out of 31st once this week. They did. So for Detroit fans, it isn't a matter of not moving out of 31st because they're 3-6-1 in their last 10, which is better than most of their 10-game periods this year. But, however, the team that they passed moved back past them with a victory of their own. They are 25th overall in the standings, the team that's 30th on the board. And they were 30th last Saturday as well, and that's Buffalo. They're 3-7 in their last 10, and so that doesn't change. And again, there may not be a whole lot of change this week because of just there weren't that many games played. Number 29 on the board. They're also number 29 overall. They were 29th on last week's as well. And that's San Jose. That's a brand new San Jose one. I know it doesn't look like it. I got some new ones yesterday, which are actually just, they're the same, mostly the same stickers I had before. Mostly. But the stickers I had before are getting kind of scratched up. And I don't know if it shows up very well on the camera or not, but I don't like using scratched up stickers. And when I find a deal on them on eBay, and that's where I get all of them from for the most part, it's just eBay, then I grab them up. Number 28. And these guys are in the same spot they were last week. They are 30th overall. They are now San Jose is 3-6-1 in their last 10. This team is 4-5-1 in their last 10, and that's Ottawa. And that's a brand new Ottawa one as well. Again, it's the same, almost exactly the same as the one I was using for it last week. Other than this one's got kind of sparkly around the outside, and you can't really see it on the camera. So I guess you guys can take my word for it. But people are going to be arguing with me anyways about the power rankings, so don't worry about the sparkly stickers. Just argue with the power, because this is what we do, right? This is that normalcy we're all looking for right now. Number 27. This team drops one spot this week. They stand 24th overall in the NHL, and they are 4-5-1 in their last 10. And that's Montreal. We are not into any teams yet that are going to be necessarily feeling like if the season had gone the full 82 games, they would have made it. They were going to do something special. San Jose, they'd been playing better, still 3-6-1 in their last 10. So, no, it wasn't really turning around for them. Number 26. These guys were 27 last week. They stand 27th overall in the NHL. And they were 5-3-2 in their last 10 games. Anaheim. So Anaheim moving their way up to 26. And there isn't really a whole lot of, I don't know how to put it, a whole lot of great things going on right now for Anaheim, but they did play well in their last 10, and I think the new guys and the kids they were bringing in, there's some positivity. I don't think that California next season, and there will be a next season, I don't think California, there's a lot of, it never come back. That's it. It never come back. It's it for sports. Now we're all going to play lawn darts in the backyard. We're not. They took lawn darts away. See, now we miss lawn darts. I miss lawn darts. I've mentioned this in videos before. I miss lawn darts. And it wasn't safe enough for kids. And I'm like, what? I'm not allowed to play lawn darts because some stupid kid threw one up and landed in his face? That's just meaning your kid's not going to make it. It's just nature's way of letting you know. Number 25. If you got stuck in the eye with a lawn dart as a kid, you have my apologies. Apologies of the channel. You're actually really smart. Number 25, down. No, not down at all. They're actually, they were number 25 last week. They're 23rd overall. And I know, Chicago had a half decent few days there. Played well. Beat the hell out of the Sharks. The Sharks are 29th. So you weigh that against everything. And that's something that, when I'm doing the power rankings and I'm doing the board every night, I go, okay, Chicago beat the crap out of San Jose. But it's San Jose, and they're in free fall. So that's why teams don't always move up if they win, and they don't always drop if they lose. San Jose didn't drop below Buffalo because they said, well, no, I'm not moving Buffalo up because Buffalo hasn't been great lately either. So that's the thought process I go into every night, and I've kind of not been doing that the last few days, and it's just sort of me wandering around. It's been me wandering around, even sending my wife. So this is weird, right? Like, it's just, the whole thing's weird. Number 24, dropping from 22 last week. They went into this break at 2-4-4. Probably quite happy that it happened when it did. Because the New York Islanders, having watched the last Canucks, potentially the last Canucks home game of the regular season on Tuesday night, days kind of bleed together now too, because I'm not doing previews and reviews, so, right? The Islanders and the Canucks were both struggling defensively. Tremendously struggling defensively, which is weird because, while the Islanders weren't allowing the same number of shots for the Canucks, there were some pretty good shots they were allowing. This is not the New York Islanders that we saw early in the season. The New York Islanders of early in the season would just strangle the game. Now, they lost Pelech. Pelech may very well be part of the reason why right now they sit 16th overall, but below the playoff line in the East. And when you look at it on the board, yeah, it looks bad. You've got a 19th overall team in Nashville above the playoff line. But again, if we do decide to go back to playing hockey, odds are this whole thing changes. There are some crazy ideas they got out there. And you know what? For people who want 1 versus 16 and all this cross-pollination between conferences, you may get it if they come back. You may get a situation where the NHL says, you know what? We got to make this as wacky as possible. But this is also a time where teams may be looking to minimize travel just for safety reasons. So, again, we'll see what happens. But for the Islanders, they're probably quite happy that this is it for the season for them right now. They were not playing well going into it. And that game in Vancouver, not their best game either. Number 23. It was an exciting game, but I could see that both teams were likely giving their coaches extra gray hair. Theoretical gray hair, I would think, with Barry Trotz, but still, it's still gray hair. Number 23. These guys move up from 24 last week. They're 18th overall in the NHL. They went into this break at 4-4-2. I'm going to keep saying break, and I know people are going to be like, it's not a break. Look, I'm an optimist. It's a break. Number 23 is the Florida Panthers. Now, again, over their last 10 games, 4-4-2, not playing fantastic hockey for the most part, but keeping things interesting. Winning enough games to keep things interesting between themselves and the Toronto Maple Leafs, which is, I think, part of the reason why the NHL says, all right, we're going to play a truncated season. We will see teams below the playoff line have a chance to potentially play their way in. So whether it's a single wildcard game, best 2 out of 3, however they would do it, I think the NHL realizes this is not a perfect setup, and that whether they go by points percentage or regulation wins or whatever you go by, it's not a perfect solution, and they want to come up with one that works. So, and it's worth pointing out, some teams have played 60. There's one team that's played as low as 68 games, which I think is the Islanders. I think they've played the least, and then there are teams that have played 71. So this is where things get kind of tricky. Number 22, and these guys dropped from 19 last week. And went into the break 4-5-1 in their last 10. They stand 20th overall in the National Hockey League, and that's the Vancouver Canucks. So again, going back to the other night, watching them against the Islanders, I didn't think Vancouver played particularly well either. Demko played great, but that was on the heels of them losing that game against Columbus, where they played well enough, but they are trending in the wrong direction. It's just it's a trend they've been having lately that, that win over the Islanders, that's a shootout win. And so you treat that as a tie. I do anyways on the board. And so there's no real reward that comes out of that. So that's why they take a drop from the game against Columbus, because I dropped them below Columbus. Columbus, they stand 13th overall. They're above the playoff line. They did come in and beat Vancouver. And Columbus was 23 last week. They're 21 this week. Columbus goes into the break 3-4-3 in their last 10. They're likely happy that they've got the break as well, with all the injuries that they had over the last season. Likely happy that they're not happy about how, but they're happy that they would have a chance, should the season get restarted, to have guys back and healthy. And they could really benefit from this break greatly. Number 20, dropping from number 18 last week. They went into the break 6-2-2 in their last 10. They're 26th overall. And it's the New Jersey Devils. And the New Jersey Devils take a bit of a drop. So, yeah, New Jersey's at number 20. Again, overall, they were 26th. They lost their last game against Pittsburgh, and they got passed. So this is a matter of not New Jersey playing badly, just them getting passed. And this is, again, why people are like, why did my team drop? They got passed. Number 19. These guys were 17 last week, so they got passed as well. They stand 22nd overall in the NHL. They went into the break 5-5, and they lost 2 in a row going into the break. And that's the Arizona Coyotes, although this says Phoenix. And there's a scratch right there. It's one of those things that drives me crazy. So the Coyotes go into the break, and again, below the playoff line. If we don't play more regular season, then their season is done. And then you get into the question of, how much is Taylor Hall worth? Does he stay in Arizona? Do they want to keep him in a long-term agreement, which is what John Chayka said he wants to do. But the reality is, if this team misses the playoffs officially, that may change some plans above John Chayka. There may be those above John Chayka that say, yeah, we don't want to be spending that much money on Taylor Hall. So, of course, I'm talking about Alex Mariuello, who may very well lose money out of all this that's going on as well. And they say, you know what, we can't be spending that kind of money on Taylor Hall. We took a bath this season with everything that's happened. And so, we can't. So I'm not saying in like a micromanaging Melnick kind of way, but basically a GM going to an owner, which is not unheard of, and saying, look, I want this kind of money for this guy. And the owner going, can't. You watch Moneyball, you see that. I need this money for this. Nope. Need Rincon. Nope. Need Rincon or we can't lose in the playoffs. Okay, but you better lose in the playoffs. We will. Moneyball, story of no championships. So yeah, Arizona's at 19. Now, number 18, these guys were 21 last week. They go into the break 8-1-1. They were up to 28th overall in the NHL. Yeah. But the LA Kings, I even heard them talking in Overdrive yesterday. I heard Jamie McLennan talking about it, saying the Kings might be playing the best hockey in the league right now. So if at the end of all this we come back to play and they say, you know what, we're going to have a tournament with everybody in it, because why not? So they just don't know. This is one of those crazy, wild ideas that's out there. He said if we started a playoff system where everybody could get in, he said with the way the Kings are playing right now, they could do some damage if they actually created a playoff system where being 28th overall, yeah, you're still in. Come on, everybody in. Come on, we want fans to feel included. So come on, everybody in. Yeah, the Kings are a team that they're playing really, really well. They've got all the kids in there. And again, I can't help but feel like if not for Velarde's health issues that stopped him from making his debut until 10 games ago, if they had not just kept Cal Peterson in the minors, if they had made a move with Campbell earlier in the year, maybe the Kings would have been playing important games right now. Because most of the pieces that are playing really well for them right now were already there. So it's really weird to watch this, and it's something I complained about all year, and now that I'm watching them, and I'm seeing how well Peterson's been playing, and Velarde looks great, and I'm like, yeah, right, this is a pretty good team. So I think the Kings get back to the playoffs next year. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that they get back to the playoffs next year. I'm also going to say for Vancouver fans, if you're still watching, because they may not be, I think next year's the year where they take that step into being a contender. It takes a while to build to be a contender. If you're doing it right, there are teams that will jump into it and then fall right back out. Number 17. These guys were 20th last week. They won a couple. They're 11th overall, so pretty high overall. They're a wild card, but the Carolina Hurricanes, they moved up 3 spots. So that's why you see a drop here and a drop here. The Kings move up and Carolina moves up. So that's sometimes the thing when people watch power rankings. Why'd my team drop? Because other teams passed them. And Carolina playing pretty well this week in a limited sample size and all that. Number 16. These guys dropped from 14th. They're probably very happy that they get a bit of a breather. And again, treating it like it's a bit of a breather. They're number 10th. They're number 10 overall in the NHL. Going into the break, Carolina was 5-4-1. Like I said, they were 8-1-1. And the team that's 16th was 3-5-2. And not a great way to end things off with that loss at home against the Rangers. And there are problems in Dallas. And the thing with Dallas is that while they're probably glad that all the losing is stopped and they can, reset should we get back to hockey pretty, about 4 weeks from now. The thing is, it's not injuries that were causing these problems either. So while there are other teams on the board like Columbus that could say, all right, well, if we can get healthy, we're good. Dallas doesn't have that. So it gets trickier for Dallas. Number 15. These guys are in the same spot they were last week. They were 7-3 going into this. They're 21st overall in the NHL. Minnesota. And Minnesota's, they're one of those teams that you can look at and say, well, they're not in the playoffs. They're 21st overall. Better luck next year. But boy howdy, the way Minnesota has been playing lately, if you play the full 82 games, I think Minnesota makes it. So the video I did where I was speculating who may or may not make it, we may never know. But yeah, I think Minnesota, playoff team should be, sure, if we get there. And they're one of the teams that you can make the argument that yes, they're below the playoff line, right? But if we're going to say, all right, that's it for the season, you got to look at percentages. You got to look at some teams have played more games than others. For instance, Winnipeg has played 70 games. Nashville and Vancouver have played 68. So if you go by pure points right now, Winnipeg gets in. If you go by winning percentage, Winnipeg doesn't. That's not a scenario that the NHL wants at all. That is absolutely not it. So unless they figure out a way to get everybody to 70 games or 71 games and then push on, we'll see something else go on here to make sure the right teams make the playoffs. Number 14, these guys move up from 2 spots from where they were last week. They were 12th overall in the NHL. And the Toronto media right now have to feel kind of lost. Because they aren't able to praise the Raptors and praise or criticize the Wings right now. Or the Leafs. Everybody will criticize the Wings right now. Not for their future, though, before Wings fans say anything. Not for the future. Future looks good because you got Stevie Y at the helm and he's got draft control. And Ottawa's very happy right now because 30th is the Senators, 29th is San Jose. Their chances of drafting early, pretty darn good. But for Toronto, this was kind of, it had been a rough patch for them on and off. They're 5-4-1 in their last 10. And with their blue line injuries, probably a good time to get a bit of a break and maybe get some guys healthy. And again, you're trying to find a silver lining in these situations, and so if your team is one that's been playing with so many injuries, this might be an excellent time for them, Colorado. But yeah, Toronto moves up 2 spots from where they were last week. They switched places with Dallas. So this is kind of where that works. That Minnesota stays in the same spot, Toronto moves up here, and Dallas moves down there because they can't score. Dallas can't score. If you don't score goals, you start to drop. Number 13, dropping 2 spots from where they were last week, but they stand 7th overall. They also were 3-7 going into the break. So the break couldn't have come at a better time for Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's like, all right, good. All right, now, no. We're 3rd in our division. We're happy with that. Don't pay any attention to the 3-7 in the last 10. We won the last game we played going into this, which was against New Jersey, which is fine. Yeah, great. Pittsburgh, I don't know where they're at right now in terms of, the restart. Are they a contender? it's going to help them if we get back into hockey in 30 days, however long that takes. The break's going to help them. They're a more veteran team, and it's going to help them. We've seen with Sidney Crosby coming back from injury how well he plays that first few games. You have to think with a break where he's healthy, it's going to be even more dramatic, and the games will be very important, likely very intense right out of the gate. There's been talk about, well, they're not going to be in great shape. These athletes, odds are they all have home gyms. They will all get to skate plenty before we actually play games that matter again. I think we'll be fine when it comes to the intensity of the games because they'll look at the standings and know where we're at. Number 12. Moving up one spot from last week. They're 6-3-1 in their last 10. And it's Calgary. Now, the Flames, they stand 17th overall in the NHL. But they're third in their division. And they could potentially, again, if we play games, they could find their way to catch up to the Oilers. It's not likely, but it's possible. And the Flames, I think the good news for them is they've had a pretty good year while Gaudreau hasn't. So we look ahead to 2020, 2021, you have to think that Johnny Gaudreau will have a bounce back year from what's happened this year. It's just kind of been a mess. And that with a bounce back season, this could be a huge one for him. So, and for the team as a result. The team does rely on Gaudreau. I mean, I know they've got a lot of other good players, but if Johnny Gaudreau is that much better, we saw last year that his 99-point season was a big part of, and just that line in general was a big part of how Calgary ended up finishing first in the West. Number 11, dropping 2 spots from where they were last week. They're 4-3-3 in their last 10. They stand 5th overall. And this is where people are going to say, well, the Capitals are 5th overall, and you have them at 11th, and nobody else has them below this number, and nobody else has. Yeah, I know. And it is what it is, but I go by how teams are playing right now. I look at a power rankings and I say, okay, if the playoffs started today with the way this team is playing right now, how dangerous do I think they are? And I look back at last year for how there was a flaw in that I took Tampa Bay, who had a lot of points, and they kind of seemed off going into the playoffs. But you could write that off and say, well, they were resting players, and the games weren't that important anyways, so you can understand if they weren't playing very well. But I left them in first, and I shouldn't have. And so this year, I've been harsh with teams in some cases where I'm going, no, they're not playing well right now. I'm not going to keep them up. Famously, of course, with Boston, where I thought Boston was playing like crap for a while there, where they were getting a lot of points from overtime losses, but they weren't playing well. They were blowing leads and whatnot. So for the Capitals, yes, they're 5th overall in the NHL. They stand first in their division. I don't see them as playing really, really well right now. The break helps them too. They can reset. Number 10, I will keep calling it the break. Number 10, moving up 2 spots from where they were last week. Standings, overall, they're 16th. So if you're 1 versus 16 person, you want to go 1 versus 16 in the first round. And they're 5-4-1 in their last 10. And that's the New York Rangers. Rangers had a nice bounce back going at the time that the league said, all right, we're going to have to close things down for a bit. So the New York Rangers deserve a chance to get in there. They do. And so again, they're a team that right now is below the playoff line. But I look at the way that things are going in the league and I say, you know what? They deserve a chance. And over a full 82-game schedule, I think they get in. And so we'll see what the NHL does. But the Rangers, they're a team, too, that in the first round, I wouldn't want to see them if I was Boston. Nightmare scenario to me, and I'll do a video on that over the next couple of days, I would think, on which teams I think would be a better matchup for who in the first round and which teams I think would be terrible if you're a top seed to see them in the first round. I think the Rangers, nobody wants to see them on the other side of the ice for the first round. Second round, sure. First round, no. Not with Shesterkin, not with all that excitement that's going on. You got Fox on the blue line. You got Zibanejad with 40 goals. You got Panarin with almost 100 points. You don't want that. You just don't. You're like, no, we don't want the Rangers. But you drew the Rangers. We don't care. Go get us a different team. We'll play somebody else. Go get us the Islanders. But they didn't make the playoffs. Don't care. Go get the Islanders. Nobody wants the Rangers right now. Number 9. These guys move up from 10 last week. In the overall standings, they are 15th. So they've been on a decent enough run. They're the number one wild card. And again, depending on how they go with things, Winnipeg could find themselves on the outside looking in, or they could find themselves in the playoffs. Right now, they are above the playoff line, but they've played more games. So we'll see again how it all turns out. And I wish, again, that I could give some kind of concrete anything, but I don't think the people in charge know necessarily when things get going again or what happens. So that's why I am treating this like this is the final power rankings, because if they decide, okay, we're going to start with a playoff series, once a playoff anything starts, the power rankings board is gone. And, I do all the previews for the playoffs, power rankings disappear. Number 8, dropping from number 5 last week. This is the lowest they've been in a long while. Yeah, this is the lowest they've been in a nice long while. They're 3-6-1 in their last 10. They do stand at 4th in the overall standings. But Tampa Bay, they are very, very happy that this season ended where it did. Another 3-6-1 run for Tampa. They're going to find themselves down to here, maybe down to here, maybe down to here. Maybe further. It depends on how well teams behind them are playing as well. Like Winnipeg 6-3-1 in their last 10. The Rangers are 5-4-1 in their last 10. So that 3-6-1 has dragged them out of the top row. And so Tampa, another team that's probably looking at their injury list and going, let's see, Hedman, Stamkos, yeah, we're glad we get time so those guys can potentially be healthy. And we can have them for games that are not necessarily important, but going into the playoffs, likely against Toronto if they go with traditional series, maybe against Toronto, right? Watch them come up with some kind of okay, we've reworked the playoffs, and here's who's going to meet who in the first round. And then it's Boston and Toronto. Watch them find a way to make that happen. Which is weird because number 1 versus number 12, I'm not sure how that had happened, but watch them figure out a way to make that happen. So yeah, Tampa Bay dropped and dramatically. The shootout loss to Detroit was a tie. I could understand them having a bit of an off night right after, or off day, I guess. This wasn't a night game. And they had very little turnaround between the game against Boston and the game against Detroit. And it felt like they put everything on the ice against Boston and they had nothing left against Detroit. So, yeah, we'll see how things go from here for Tampa should we get back to action. Number 7, same spot as last week. They go into the break with a 5-3-2 record over their last 10. And they're second in their division. They're 9th overall in the NHL. Oilers. So yes, the Oilers do maintain their spot in the top row despite the loss to Vegas, because it's Vegas. Vegas played very, very well going into the break. So yeah, Edmonton for me stays at 7. Past Tampa. Didn't think I'd see that happen during the season. So if this is where we freeze things for the end of the year, Edmonton finishes ahead of Tampa Bay in the overall power rankings. I really didn't see, and Capitals, Penguins. It's bizarro world this year. But the Oilers played pretty well going into it. And again, I know they lost against Vegas, but I felt like Tampa had a worse time of it over the last few days than Edmonton. That's why I dropped them down. Number 6, they were number 8 last week. This is the first time they've been in the top row in the power rankings, I want to say since November. They're 19th overall in the NHL. They were above the playoff line. They're 6-3-1 in their last 10. And this is a team that Nashville's dangerous as a wild card. So do you want Nashville in the first round? I think the answer is no. I do. I think the answer is no. I don't think you want Nashville in the first round. So, yeah, the Preds, 6th overall. And, yeah, there we go. We'll see what happens, right? Yeah, exactly. Number 5. And these guys were number 6 last week. Notice that Tampa Bay is no longer number 5. That's important. There's some fans that won't be happy if Tampa Bay was still ahead of them. They're 8-2 in their last 10. They stand 2nd overall in the NHL, and that's St. Louis. So the Blues go into the break with the finishing of the game against Anaheim. Yeah. And that's where it could be the end of the regular season, right? So that was the makeup of the game where, of course, Joe Bouwmeester collapsed earlier in the year. Thankfully, he's okay now, and there's a lot of optimism around him. But for St. Louis, they move up that one spot. I think they were playing pretty darn well. That's why they moved in a few weeks from Let's see, they were 13th 4 weeks ago. Moved up to 7th, moved up to 5th, dropped to 6th. They're back up to 5th. They've been playing pretty well. I just think there are 4 teams that are playing pretty darn well as well. Now, at number 4, these guys are 7-2-1 in their last 10. So they have one less win than St. Louis out of 10. They have one more overtime loss. And they stand 3rd overall in the NHL. They were number 3 last week. So they did drop. And that's Colorado. Colorado drops 1 spot this week. And so they are just ahead of St. Louis. And honestly, if they played the games between Thursday and now, odds are St. Louis is probably ahead of them. But for Colorado, there is no team that needed a break to get healthy more than Colorado. Columbus, I see you, but I think Colorado had it worse with the McKinnon injury. I'm just throwing that out there. And yeah, so for Colorado and for Nathan McKinnon and for that whole team, this came at a kind of a perfect time to get healthy. But it came at kind of a bad time too, because they were playing pretty well. Yes, they lost to the Kings, but the Kings won 8 out of their last 10. So, which you could trace the Kings winning and playing better to the game against Colorado Avalanche, the outdoor game. That's kind of where LA started to turn things around. So, a loss to LA isn't really as embarrassing as it would have been in November. And I think Colorado's playing pretty good hockey. Number 3. These guys were number 4 last week. They're 8th overall in the NHL. They're 8-2 in their last 10. So, Vegas. Vegas at number 3. They're number 1 in the Pacific. And they've been one of the best teams in the league for about a month now. And again, we're not going to see dramatic movement here. Just little small moves back and forth. And so, you see Vegas move up 1 spot. Colorado move down 1. St. Louis move up 1 because Tampa Bay has gone... And Nashville moves up a couple, and Edmonton stays in the same spot. These rankings are more like what you see on the NHL website or other power rankings I see online where I'm like, really, nobody moved this week? It's kind of how this feels. So Vegas moves up to 3, and I can understand why they were odds-on favorites for many to win the Stanley Cup. I get it. I'm not going to disagree with it either. Not exactly, although I don't know that Fleury necessarily can go 4 rounds still, but they do have Leonard now, so they could do maybe a goaltending rotation in the playoffs, which is odd, but it's happened before. So, that could potentially work, depending on scheduling and all that other wonderful stuff. We may very well find out. So number 2, it's not who you think. So these guys are 7-3 in their last 10. That's gonna tip it off for some people. Now, the last game Boston played, they beat Philadelphia 2-0. And I saw that on my phone, and I said to Yvonne, I said, I'm sure there are people right now who are figuring, oh, great, he's going to put Boston into first. No. Boston's been playing very, very well lately, yes. Again, they're first overall in the NHL. And they're first by a bit, and they end up with 100 points so far. So far, I'm not giving up. 7-3 in their last 10. They were second last week, third the week before. They were first 3 weeks ago, third 4 weeks ago, second, third. They've been in between first and third for a 7-week span, including this. And again, playing very, very well. They do have their games where they play down to their opponents when they're against some weaker teams. That kind of drives me a little bit nuts. And I felt like, yes, they went in and beat Philadelphia, but I wasn't going to bump them up to 1 based on that game. Because 1 loss in 10 shouldn't bump Philadelphia out. So, yeah, Boston goes to second. And number 1 for the second week in a row is Philly. And I promise you, Philly fans, the league didn't break because you guys are number 1 in the power rankings. That didn't happen. Philadelphia right now looks like a contender. They look like they could do some serious damage in a playoff series. And depending on when things get started up again, yeah, Philadelphia is going to be a favorite to win the Stanley Cup. I would think right now, if we're going to look at it, I would think I'll say 1 team from each division. The favorites would be Philadelphia, Boston, Vegas, and St. Louis. That, I think, would be the 4 favorites if you're going to pick 1 from each division. Now, I don't think Boston's as clear-cut a contender as some people think. I think it's going to be difficult to go through a 4-round war of attrition like last year, because they did it last year. But, and again, the rest could help Boston and St. Louis, because there's still going to be a lot of bumps and bruises that may not have completely healed up over the summer before you get back into training camp. So the difference between the Stanley Cup Finals and training camp is not as long as it once was. And these guys are bigger, they're faster, they hit harder. I can imagine there's a lot of bumps and bruises that don't necessarily feel 100% okay when you get to training camp. So this may very well benefit teams that had long runs last year and maybe give them that energy that they can go on another long run. We'll see. So there you go. Could be the final power rankings. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for all your support. It means a lot. And I'm reading my books over on the other channel as well, because I'd intended to do that this summer, and here we are. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again very soon.